Daf Ein Vav Amud Beis, 5 lines from the top. Continuing on with our discussion, we had in the Mishnah that we learned that if there's a chaloin, if there's an opening between two chatzeres, if there's a window in the wall, then they have the option of being ma'ar echad together or separately, as long as the window is at least daled by daled, and a part of it, at least a part of it, is within 10 tefachim of the ground. Rav Yochanan said if you have a circular window, a window which is in the shape of a circle, it needs a circumference of 24 tefachim, which we're struggling to understand why you need such a large opening. A daled by daled is, if you have a daled by daled, therefore it's 4 by 4. If we say the circumference is 3 times the size of the width or the length of the square, it should be 3 times, roughly approximately 3 times, then 12 should be enough. So the Gemara said, yes, but that is where you have a circle, which you want to then create a circle, and therefore you need to have the circle that has the same area as the square. It would be enough if it's 12. But over here, what we require is that there is a square that we are able to insert in the circle. The Gemara said, well, the perimeter of a square is 25% more than the circumference of a circle. So why do you need so much? You should only need 16. The perimeter of a square, if you have 4 tefachim on each side, so it's 4 times 4, it should be 16, should be sufficient. The Gemara said that's when you have a gula denafim ravua, a circle in a square. But here we want to put a square in a circle, so therefore you need a larger area. So frak the Gemara michte kol amsa beribua, any Amma that is in a square, it's, when you look at the diagonal of the square, if on a straight line it's 4, if you look on the diagonal is 1.4, 1 2/5 longer than the straight line. Straight line, if this is 4, then the diagonal is 1.4, 1 2/5 greater than that. So therefore, that means that the diagonal of the square should be 5.6. And then if we take the circumference of that, it's times 3, then b'shivsa nakichumsha sagi, it should be enough to have 17 less a fifth, meaning 16 4/5. So we have a circle doesn't have the diagonal. The diameter of a circle is the same at any point. When you have a square, so the straight line may be 4. The diagonal is 1.4 times that. So the diagonal on it, well, if it's 4 on the straight line, the diagonal on it would be then 5.6. If you want to put the circle into the square, then what we have to ensure, if you're surrounding the circle with the square, is that it has to be large enough that you can have the diameter, not only the diameter over here, that's 4, it has to be, if you're putting the square and the circle is now surrounding the square, it has to cover and come around this area over here. So therefore, we'll have to allow for, it has to allow for the diagonal. So therefore, if the diagonal is 1.4 times 4 tefachim, the diagonal is 5.6, the circumference is times 3, so it should be enough to have 17 less a fifth, 16.8 should be enough. So why do you need 24? Why does the circle have to be 24 tefachim? So more answer, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Aki Dayan the case, right? The case. So he was following the opinion of the Dayanim or the Rabban of the case. Sorry, who said that if you have a circle inside a square, it has to be a quarter. The difference is a quarter. But rivu migav igula palga. But if you have a square inside a circle, the circle has to be 50% larger. So now, if we're saying that the perimeter of the square, it has to be a square of Dalet al Dalet. So four on each side. So 4, 8, 12, 16. Then they say the circle that surrounds it has to be 50% larger than that. 50%, half of 16 is 8. 16 plus 8 is 24. That's why the circle has to be 24. It has to have a circumference of 24 tefachim. The issue over here is that mathematically and obviously visually, it's clear that you don't need that large a circle. That you could, in less than 24, and then the circumference is 24, you could put a square of 4 by 4. So what would be the pshat of the Dayan of the Kesri, and why Rav Yochanan say that you need a circle of 24? The Gaon Yaakov says is that the pshat is that not that mathematically you require 24, circumference of 24. It's clear that you don't need such a large circle. But since people might confuse, they say when we deal with this, when we say that there's a requirement to put a square in a circle, we require that large a circle, not that it mathematically a square of 4 by 4, a square with 16, with a perimeter of 16, requires a circle of 24, a circumference of 24 tefachim. But when we say that when we require a square in a circle, in order so that people don't make mistake and don't get confused, we require the circle to be that much bigger, that much larger, so people won't confuse it, and therefore we're machmer and we say you need a circle of 24 with a circumference of 24 tefachim. Rav Nachman says, where do we say that you need a window? That we learned this halacha that you need a window and it has to be 4 by 4 and with 10 in the ground. The halacha the Mishnah, that's only a chaloin shebein beis chatzeres. If it's a window between two chatzeres, ava chaloin shebein beis batim. But if it's a wall that separates two houses, and then the issue is over here, can they be ma'arav together? The two houses, ava chaloin shebein beis batim afilu l'mala me'asara nami imaratzu la'arev ma'arvin echad. They say even if it's above 10, even if no part of the window is below 10, they can still join together in an Eruv. My time of basic amount of maladami, because we view the house as being one solid area. If it's in an open area, there's chatzeres, which are open. There's a wall between them. There we say that the window of the wall, in order to join together in an Eruv, it has to be within, at least part of it, within 10 of the ground. However, if it's a wall between two houses, the houses are in a closed area. And there's an enclosed area, even though it is above 10 of the ground, we view it as all being one enclosed area, and therefore it's viewed as being below 10. So there's no requirement that the window be below 10. Now, as the Rishonim speak out, then understand this, that there are really two ways of understanding why a house is basically on the Malyadami. Either because there are objects in the house, and therefore you can climb on them. So an area above 10 tefachim from the ground is accessible because you can stand on a chair or on a table, etc. So therefore we don't make this distinction between below and above 10, because even an area that's higher is accessible because of the furniture you have in the house. The other way of understanding it is that it's not because of the furniture, it's because it's an enclosed area, a dark enclosed area, and we view it as being a solid area, as a solid mass, and we don't view the upper and lower areas being any different. We'll see in the Gemara's next discussion that there's enough kamina between explain the understanding of these two cases. So, Rav Nachman, ask you a kasha. You're telling me with a house, it doesn't have to be within 10 of the ground. The Brisa says, it's the same where the window is between two chatzeres, or whether it's between two houses, or whether it's a skylight between an upper and a lower floor. In all these cases, or whether it's a case of two rooms in a house, Kulan, dalet al dalet, b'soich hasara. In all these cases, it has to be, the opening has to be dalet al dalet within 10 of the ground. So you see that even in a house, it has to be within 10 of the ground. More answer, Nachman answer, no, that only applies, this requirement of within 10 of the ground, it only applies to chatzeres. It says both in this case, whether it's in this case or not, it's equating, it's all the same. So how can you say it's restricted only to chatzeres? Nachman answers, Tirguma al dalet al dalet. Where do we say it's all the same? It's the requirement of dalet al dalet, that the opening has to be at least dalet al dalet. There, it makes no difference if it's chatzeres or it's batim or whether it's an attic or rooms. In all the cases, in all these areas, the opening has to be at least dalet al dalet. But the requirement that it has to be within 10 of the ground applies to the case of the chaser. It does not apply to the case of the bias. So he asked the following shaila: if you have a skylight that's open between the house, the lower floor, and the upper floor, so do we say over there that in order to join together and to be considered joined together with one eruv that has to be accessible, do you need a permanent ladder placed over there so that the two floors are accessible to each other by way of the skylight? What's the shaila? When we say that a house is considered full and therefore the window does not have to be within 10 of the ground, perhaps that's only on the side. Perhaps there's no difference. Now, the way the Rishonim were masber that we mentioned earlier about what the shaila about the two ways of learning basic command Amalia is, then we understand the shaila as follows. If you say that it's because of furniture, that the reason why in a house that the opening of Nachman says it doesn't have to be within the 10 of the ground, because since there's furniture in the house, it's accessible and you can climb up. Well, perhaps that's only minatzad, because you put furniture on the side, by the walls. By the walls, that's where you put a couch, you put chairs, tables. You don't put it in the middle of the room. So perhaps over there, we would say that if it has a skylight that's high, then it's not considered accessible, because you don't have furniture in the middle opposite a skylight, below a skylight, that would make it accessible and easy to climb up. And therefore, perhaps you would say you need a sulam kavua, you need a permanent ladder. Or, however, if we say the other side of it, it's not because, practically speaking, you can climb up and there's furniture, but inherently the house is command Amalia because it's an enclosed area, and therefore we don't view the different heights as having any significance. Therefore, you would not need a ladder even opposite the skylight, because the whole area of the lower floor is considered to be one mass. Amalei Rav Nachman says, "Einat sarach." You don't need a ladder. You don't need a ladder between the two. So Sabra minay sul and kavud einat sarach. So they thought to say that means you don't need a permanent ladder, but hasulam arai sarach. But you do need a temporary ladder. So Itmam Rav Yosef Bar Min Yom Rav Nachman Echasul Kavuch Echasul Maharai Einai Sorry. He said, no, you don't need a ladder whatsoever. You don't need any ladder. So that is consistent with the explanation of on the tzad that it's basic command Amalia. It's considered to be one enclosed area, one mass. Therefore, you don't need a ladder at all, because there's no distinction between the heights, lower and higher. It's all considered one volume, one mass, one area. Zok the Mishnah, if you have a wall between two chatzeres, which is 10 high, 4 wide, and there is no window between them, marvim shnayim vein marvim echad, then it's a separation. They cannot join together in erev. Marvim shnayim. Now we'll see what the significance is that the width of the wall is 4 tvachim. That's not relevant to this discussion, because if you have a wall, even if it's a narrow wall, if there's no opening, the chatzeros are separate, and therefore you cannot join together in erev. So we'll see the significance of the width of the wall momentarily. So therefore, if you have a kaisel, a separation between the chatzeros, there's no pesach between them. They have to be ma'arav separately. They cannot join together. If there's fruit on top of the wall, so the people on one side of it can climb up the wall and eat the fruit here, and therefore they can eat it there. And the people on the other side can also climb up and eat the fruit on the wall. They can eat it, but they can't bring it down. They can't bring it down from the top of the wall, that the top of the wall is a separate Rishus HaYochid, and they would be to bring it down into the chaser on the other side. They can't do that because the chatzeros are considered separate. So nifetza kaisel, if there was a opening in the wall was breached, it was open, so you have an opening, ad eser amas, as long as it's not more than a length of 10 amas, ma'arvim shnayim v'rotz ma'arvim echad. If you have an opening, as long as it's not longer than 10 amas, it's considered to be a Pesach. So it's like the case we had previously, in the previous Mishnah, that you have a wall between the two chatzeros, so there's a Pesach between them. So they have the option of ma'arvim shnayim ma'arvim echad. Bimnei shehu Pesach, because as long as it's not more than 10, it's considered to be a Pesach. But more than that, but it's more than that, then it's considered to be breached. It's considered to be wide open. It's considered that there is no wall between them, and they must join together. They cannot be marav separately, because they're all considered to be one area, and they all have to join together in the area. So the Gemara, let's say the wall does not have a width of 4. It's a narrow wall. It doesn't have a width of 4. Can you carry on that wall at all? We say that the chatzeros on both sides, the air of the, so to speak, of the chatzer on both sides, are ruling over that area. They both have that area under their control, and they dominate that area, and therefore you can't move it even the width of a hair. You can't move it whatsoever. As the way the Ritva explains it, it says as follows: we're talking where both each chatzer made their own erev. Now, since that we say it's a narrow area and it has both chatzeros have equal access to it and equal dominion over it, it's as if it belongs and they both rule on that area. Now, just like you can't transfer from one chatzer to another chatzer, according to the sheets of the Rabbanan, you can't without an error from one chatzer there, or according to Rishimin, from one chatzer to the house of another area. You can't transfer from one to the other. Here, as Rashi explains, it's considered to be under the dominion of both chatzeros, since it's a narrow area. It's bottled to both, and any movement of it is considered like transferring from one chatzer to another chatzer. But Rav Yochanan Amar Elamala Mikan Va'Eichlan Ve'Elamala Mikan Va'Eichlan. But Rav Yochanan says no, you can bring food up from one chatzer and eat it, and you can bring from another chatzer and eat it on the top of the wall. Then you can bring from other area. They each have their own control on that area. So now the Gemara will explain, and we'll see through the next Talmud what is these two shitas, and we'll ask questions and try to clarify these two shitas.